Well, welcome, Addis.
Glad to be here, Clark. Thank you for having me.
Share a little bit just about who Addis Ziga is.
Well, Addis Ziga was born in Bosnia, early 80s, and after the whole war situation, I made my way to United States, where I currently live here in Charlotte, North Carolina, our beautiful state of North Carolina, and found myself getting education in this lovely system of ours, and just made my way through corporate America, currently working in the financial industry.
Well, let's go back, share a little bit where you were born and just growing up there, and then obviously we'll get into your memories and reflections of the war when you were there, but just tell us a little bit about your childhood and where you grew up.
Yeah. Well, I was born in Yugoslavia, and eastern part of the Bosnia was one of the Yugoslavian republics. I was born in small town of Rogatica in eastern Bosnia. And just like any child, you born and just like having these ideas and you've seen in movies and things of that nature, and you just kind of create your own fantasies, where you want to go, what do you want to do, and it's just you playing, you going to school, you walk into school. Where I grew up, we had to walk at least 4 miles to school in one way. Every day, and through small forests and stuff like that. It just really holds a special place in my heart. And then just out of nowhere, as a child, you don't really pay attention to certain things, but you see like your parents like watching news, but then they start watching news like really closely. And then the neighbors and friends and cousins start watching news together, and they just talk. And then you as a child, you're just playing. You don't really paying attention. Well, little did I know, that there was going to be a point in time where, I'm going to go in classroom and teacher going to come in saying, hey, we're going to have a dismissal, and we don't know when we're going to return to school, because, nearby neighborhoods and villages are being, under attack. So of course, again, you being a child, you really don't, you don't understand. You're not really comprehending what's really going on. And coming home, I remember seeing my parents watching the news, specifically demonstrations in capital city of Bosnia and Sarajevo, where the army around the city, starting to take hostages and putting barricades and stuff like that. So we were like, this is not happening. It's not going to happen. We grew up in this peace, brotherhood, and that's what you were taught in school. And Marshal Tito was someone who you respect, that you honor, that it's brotherhood. There's no way that's going to be happening to our country. But obviously Tito died in 1980, and there was a lot of tension for nationalism and amongst all of republics, especially the largest republics, where they always felt like when Tito came to power with partisans, that he pretty much forced everyone to work together, to live together in harmony and brotherhood. And I guess for 50 years, how long he has been in power, that was just kind of like sitting there waiting to spill over or break into whatever it did break into in the war. So, in that part of the country, in the small town where I grew up, Žepa, is, we were pretty much right off the bat doomed, in the sense of that living in the eastern part of the country, most of our lands, most of our properties, and major roads and everything was bordering the neighboring country, which was republic, which was Serbia, which was one of the largest republics at the time. And that's, you know, there was a lot of you know, in our our neighbors, the people who we grew up, people that we knew as our friends, who worked with our parents, you know, the Serbian individuals, they started to, you know, form small groups of army that would get weaponry, because majority of people's armies' weapons were strategically located in Serbian territory. Now, when I say this, I want to say this, that, you know, not all Serbs are the same. I want to point that out, because there are some good people in every people, obviously, but those individuals who specifically wanted to steal or take away from Bosnia those specific regions like Srebrenica, which I'm sure you have heard, and many people have heard, the massacre that took place in '96. You know, so you know, it's really hard. It's really hard to comprehend that the very same people that you grew up with were just kind of turning against you, just primarily. I guess now that we're looking back on history, was idea of Radovan Karadzic and Ratko Mladic to do ethnic cleansing of civilians, basically based on religious beliefs. Again, two crazy men, two crazy ideas, and they were fortunate enough to gather enough followers to do just that. From like 1992 all the way through, you know, 1996, I mean, we were in captivity. I mean, you know, you had two, specifically eastern part of Bosnia, you had two, you know, protected enclaves by United Nations, which happens to be in Žepa. We had Ukrainian soldiers, and in Srebrenica they were Dutch troops who supposed to, or blue helmets, if you will. If we know that blue helmets, their mission is to go in places of war and keep the peace. They are key pieces. They are not to fight. They are not to use the weapons unless they are attacked, obviously. So, you know, for all of this time that we were in this enclave, you know, imagining that there's a ring around the small towns. Srebrenica was larger city, but speaking specifically of Žepa, having this small town and having this stronghold of so-called Republic of Srpska Army, there was nothing coming in or leaving. So, you know, for that brief period of time, our fathers and whoever could, you know, possibly pick up some kind of weapon, which we didn't have any. That was the part of the town, part of the country where people didn't think of war, didn't think about having weapons, didn't think of nothing bad going to happen. I mean, you had few recreational weapons, people who were hunters, you know, that you would go hunt, but there was no, you know, automated weapons or guns and stuff like that. So when we actually start feeling that some of these soldiers might be creeping in, so they started organizing small groups of people, men who would go just kind of like on outskirts of the town, just to keep eye to make sure that no one or nothing, you know, comes in. Until United Nations didn't come in. I mean, I remember this. I remember this so vividly. When they were saying there are the United Nations trucks coming, and we went on the outskirts of our little neighborhoods, and we would watch all these Ukrainian soldiers coming down with these army trucks. They were painted in white with the big old UN letters on them, and we knew that there was food, that the food was coming. And indeed, that was actually first time for me to see like an army. You know, these individuals, they had a camouflage uniform, and I'm like, I remember just standing there looking, I'm like, wow, you know, and they were talking different language, and they looked different. And also in those peacekeepers, there was some, you know, French and certain African, nations who were part of the United Nations. And I just remember, like, you know, seeing these big old bags of flour, sugar, oil, essentials that for like so long we couldn't, because there's nothing coming in or leaving. And then just later on, United Nations and U.S. would drop pilots with parachutes from the airplanes. I mean, 2-3 tons heavy, square-looking pilots that would just drop down, and you would go in the mountains at night and try to get some kind of MREs, you know, like ready-to-eat meals that the army would eat. And I remember just being a treat for me, you know, finding those things. But just to go back, you know, when all of this started, there was a big shock. It really was a big shock because, you know, I grew up. Obviously, I was born after Tito died, but then that idea of unity always existed. I mean, every household had a Marshall's picture in their home, and like you would dare to say his name in vain or anything like that. That was you know, police, strict, everything. You know, when you see now dictatorship, I don't think you can relate those two things, because people in Yugoslavia, they were free to go anywhere you wanted to go. In fact, people would come to Yugoslavia to work, like Polish, Romanians would come in to earn a living, because country prospered, especially after 1960s, when United States and Yugoslavia were on really good terms, because at that time President Kennedy wanted some kind of allies in that part of the world, especially, you know, you had the Soviet Union right there. So, you know, there was a lot of dealings done with the United States. So Yugoslavia like prospered. I mean, we had our own car. I mean, you know, just the beautiful Adriatic Sea as far as tourism. I mean, just prospered. In 1984, Bosnia had the 14th Winter Olympic Games, which I did share. That it's just nostalgic things. That's why when I saw it come across, when you and I talked about it, I said I want to share it with Clark so he can see it. So it's things like that. It was a good times, but unfortunate, you know, just remembering, you know, some of those bad things. And as I mentioned in the beginning, you know, I witnessed people being mistreated. I witnessed people being smacked around by these soldiers. I witnessed people being, you know, injured by grenades, and, you know, have their limbs, you know, cut off and things of that nature, starvation and all of this. So it was just really disheartening to see. And I guess, you know, as a child, you were in shock to see that, you know, people pretty much spoke like us, looked like us, culturally just like us, enjoy the same music and foods, except that there was that religious difference. But other than that, or nothing surfaced. If you saw one of their soldiers on ours, you wouldn't really tell the difference. Again, you can't blame everybody, because not everybody is the same, but there was very few. My only understanding, as I'm educating myself in reading, I came to conclusion that definitely one thing, the one thing is for sure, you can influence people. And what Radovan Karadžić and Ratko Mladić did, you know, they were very smart individuals. doctors. I mean, went to school. They understood. They were high-ranking officers in the Yugoslavian People's Army, so they knew if they go to these villages where people just need somebody to lead, and even if that means wrong, people would follow. And unfortunately, the snowball effect. Oh, my cousin joined. I'm not gonna join. I'm gonna turn right. Oh, it's all right. It's been taken from us. We're gonna go ahead and get it back. I know you and I are sitting and talking, and I might be a little all over the place, but hopefully, whoever is listening this, understand that there was no ordinary day during the war. Every day was a different story because it was survival. Even as a child, you would go and try to find, collecting fruits and vegetables, and be a shepherd, whatever you needed to do, because you had to be self-sufficient. You had to provide, because we never knew when sniper gonna shoot, when they're gonna decide to send an airplane with bombs or grenades and stuff like that. That was daily. I mean, that was legit daily. I mean, we could be sitting any time of the day or night in the house, and you could hear some kind of shooting somewhere. It was just like a fireworks all the time. And just to give you an idea, that town where I come from, very small, like maybe 4,000 people, very, very small. That's a small area, but historically, really, really strong men, really, really, strong men and women come from that part of the country. And imagining that you had a whole army trying to take that. Take us as a prisoners and take our lands that we held for like 4 years alone. To all of that is fascinating when you have all kinds of weaponry on the other side, and just kind of deprive you from food and water and medical supplies or anything like that.
Well, share a little bit within the realms of your comfortability, but how you're comfortable with it, but your personal experiences, not only things that perhaps you witnessed, but also things that may have happened to you personally during this time.
Oh, absolutely, Clark. When Srebrenica was taken, and we knew that Srebrenica was occupied by Serbian army, and Dutch soldiers definitely failed to protect them, we knew there was a matter of time when it's going to happen to us. Fortunate for us, we didn't have as much as casualties as Srebrenica. As 85 plus 100 young boys and men were massacred in a matter of 2-3 days. That all in the national community just kind of pretty much turned the other cheek, didn't really care. When we realized that this is it for us, our mayor of town started negotiating with Serb army through couriers, through United Nations couriers, so they can come to one of the checkpoints, so they can meet in person, so they can figure out how to have everybody on board, so everybody surrenders, so they can send the buses or whatever, so they can just clean the town and send the civilians and men to closest town, which was Bosnian territory at the time, town of Kladanj. Men were smart enough, at least my father and many others, they did not want to surrender, because he knew that if they surrendered, most likely their fate was going to be the same as what happened in Srebrenica. So they decided to go through a few different directions through forests of Bosnia, or to maybe reach the free territory. A lot of them went towards Serbia, hoping that they would go undetected through the forest and just get to Bosnian land, and some of them went to other directions towards Gorazdes or Kladanj, or whichever one direction that we knew. But civilians, we stayed. And I remember seeing these big buses, you know, coming to town, and everybody came down, and it's just a chaos, like kids crying and women calling their kids, and they can't find it. And at that point, Serbian army, they came down and they started commingling with civilians and Ukrainian soldiers. You couldn't really tell who is who anymore. And it was kind of scary. I mean, I'm seeing these men with the AK-47s and rifles, and like right there beside me, and they just kind of like staring around, probably looking where the men were. But of course, they didn't, you know, at that point at least, they didn't, you know, harass anybody or anything like that, because they knew there was cameras around. There's still a lot of footage that you can see. You know, they kind of tried to act professional. Well, you know, everybody was filling out the buses and leaving, and when my turn was, my mom and I, my sister, and at the time my 2-year-old niece, there was no any more buses. They actually started sending like semi trucks, like big old trucks, and they would just put us on the back of it, and there was a little journey, a few hours drive that they had idea just to dump us there, and then you on your own. Well, it's really hard to describe that. Just knowing that, you know, you in this truck, and the soldiers would randomly, when the trucks would park or whatever they negotiate, whatever they were doing, anyway they would stop. Like, you would have soldiers like hitting people with the back of their guns and stuff like that. And I remember everybody just kind of like going towards the middle, and kids crying, and they need to use the restroom, you know, and they're small kids, and you know, they urinate on themselves. I mean, it's just they soil themselves, stuff like that. So it was hot. It was July. It was a month, July. It was really hot. And when we were getting closer to this point where they would dump us out of the buses or trucks, and they would order us to walk several miles to get to city of Kladanj, where there was this big tunnel. And if you go through the tunnel on the other side, there would be Bosnian army like waiting on us. That's when a lot of chaos started happening, because, you know, it was basically no man's land, and that was opportunity for these rebels, these Serbian soldiers who just kind of went off and did their own thing, started harassing people. Asking for money or gold, and if you didn't have it, well, guess what? You was gonna get beaten or else. And in all of the process, my sister and my niece were going up front of me, and my mom, it was me, and then my mom behind me. And I remember, like, really, this guy, the soldier, comes like down the hill he jumps out of the bushes, and he has like this like a red bandana on his knee, or above the knee, and it has big knife, like one of those knives that he would come like on a comeback guns, you know, if you get close, you know, fight with, I guess, you know, whatever. He took it off, he put on his leg, and he just grabs me. And he's asking my mom, obviously, like I was right with her. He said, okay, so any gold, money, this and that. My mom was like, I don't have anything. He was like, well, you know what? You better get something, because like I am about to cut his throat. He grabs me, and he grabs the gun, and he puts under my neck and demands it. Then my sister, you know, just started panicking and crying, and she's like maybe a few feet away from us, and my niece started crying, and my sister tried to like close her mouth, because like it gets them upset, because they don't want to be heard what they're doing, you know. It's gonna raise the tension, because it's like really early in the morning, and it's like almost a dawn, but it's really quiet. How you can hear like a steps of people, and it's like really creepy. This area is like creek on the other side. It's just like really horror movies. And I'm just kind of sitting there, like I remember just being like a stick, like I just froze, like I didn't know what to do. And you know, my mom started digging through stuff, and you know, she grabbed some of the money that, you know, some old bills from Yugoslavia, you know. He was like, I don't want that, that doesn't does anything, and throws it away, and it started like pushing and shoving and pressing on my neck, and then with knife. And then my mom finally found like 100 or 150 Deutschmark, which was German currency at the time. I don't know how my father had it. I remember them talking when they started sensing that there was war happening. They would take like our Yugoslavian currency, dinar, and they would exchange it for the foreign currency, because information, I mean, it was, you know, the country was falling apart. Obviously, they couldn't do anything with it. So when she gave him money, and then he started to make them more, you know, my mom said, I really don't have everything, they don't have anything. And then fortunately some other soldier says, man, just, if you gotta get through everybody, we gotta get through everybody, you know. I'm guessing he was letting them know, you got something, like, leave him alone, let's go to the next one. And needless to say, you know, that's exactly what they did. Kind of just shoved me away. My mom said that you also hit her. I did not see that, but I'm sure he did, with back of the gun, just like they were hitting the people when they were sitting on trucks. And then he was actually threatening my sister too, because baby was crying. He said, you know, you better shut it, or I'm just gonna grab it and throw it down that creek. So only thing that my mom keep telling me, say, okay, go, and I can hear him just right in the back, pulling, grabbing the next person, grabbing the next old woman, man, child, whatever. And as we were walking, like, I mean, to me, seemed like a century. I mean, it seemed so long. And I was just, I guess, in shock that, you know, hearing people saying, look at the bodies, look at the bodies. And, you know, I'm like, you know, I tried to look, and my mom just keep pushing my head to the side, because I guess she didn't want me to see. But I did get a glance that there was like, I mean, obviously you could see the body, but they were just covered with the blankets, and you could see imprint of, that's what it was. And it's so strange that, you know, when we went to back home now, when I go visit sometimes, and I like to drive through there and just kind of like, you know, explain to my friends when I go what took place. And specifically, I remember in distance seeing this, like it was kind of abandoned, like a motel. And I saw a bunch of cars of their army there, and, you know, a bunch of civilians, our people. Like I really don't know what they were doing, but, you know, later on we have found out that a lot of people were just, you know, executed, molested, raped, whatever, you know. But that was really, it was hard. It was hard to survive there as a child. Even talking about it right now, as you get older, you becoming more conscious of like what human life means, and how senseless war is to begin with, for nothing. No one won. No one won. I mean, you have all these republics, they're suffering, struggling, chaos, corruption, mafia, gangsters, nothing. People suffer. People still, you know, here in Charlotte, as I mentioned right at the beginning of this conversation, not everybody is the same. There's a lot of Serbs who feel the very same as I do about it. There was senseless war. There's a lot of Croats, a lot of Macedonians, a lot of Slovenians, you know, senseless war that took place.
Well, and remind me, how old were you at the time when this was?
When war started, I was 7 years old. When war started.
Sure.
When war started, I was 7 years old. I was second grade. I was second grade, and it's just it's hard to remember but I always want to, because if you forget your history, most likely it repeats itself. And when I talk to my friends and colleagues, a lot of times, and some of my clients, when I talk to them, and when they say, it's natural for people to ask where you're from, I say, well, I'm from Bosnia. What brings you here? And when I tell them I came as a refugee, they really ask question again, as a refugee? Because, again, we forget things. Humans, we forget things. And this was in the 90s. And who would expect, in heart of the Europe and Balkans, there was the little tiny country that there's been ethnic cleansing done in this country, and so many people. And this is just one portion, as you and I talk about, my life and where I grew up, But if you think about, so many other towns and capital city in Bosnia, it's went through similar or worse things. But for us, it was just a little extra hard and challenging and devastating, because we were so cut away from mainland of Bosnia. So we had no channels. We had nothing. We had no connection with rest. We had no idea about everything was going on. All we knew, there's a ring around the small town, and nothing is going in, coming out other than grenades.
And you've talked about it a little bit, but share a little more about just daily life experience for you. You say you couldn't go through a day where you weren't hearing guns, or you were hearing bombs, or there was fear of snipers. What was that like? You're only 7 years old.
Right. Clark, when I picture neighborhood where I was born, it's kind of like, if you ever watch the Lord of the Rings series, and the beginning of the movie, when they come to this little green lands, and everything is peace and beautiful and nature, and that's how I imagine my neighborhood where I grew up. Fruits and vegetables and green stuff, and neighbors and cousins, everybody getting along. But now all of that was gone, and for simple tasks as maybe going to your neighbor's house, or getting your cousin or friend to go play, if you could, in any given time, and I share this with you. I remember one incident where we went to play on our way home, like you hear airplanes. When you hear airplanes, you're hiding. And I remember us hiding under this cherry tree. We hiding under this cherry tree, and we looking up, and you can see the plane, and you can see these bombs. What they would do, they would improvise. The army would improvise these bombs. They would connect a bunch of small bombs with the chain for one another, and when they drop them, it would just do so much more damage. And I remember that happening, and then falling like really, really close to our neighborhood. I almost felt like the whole earth is just like shook and lifted everything up and put us back down like few feet off the ground. And I remember like a man talking, like my father, cousins talking. They would throw in these bombs also that would like fill up with the gasoline or kerosene, so the forest would catch on fire. And indeed they did. In one point of time, we thought like airplane have crashed, because it was like whole like people had to go get these buckets and try to put the fire away, so actually the neighborhood wouldn't like burn. But I guess that was part of this tragedy as well, to get the people to leave their homes so they could maybe do more damage and shootings. But few more incidents where like you hearing grenades, and you almost kind of become immune to it. Like it's part of your life, and you're like, oh, it's just shooting, I just have to do what I have to do. It's happening. And one particular time in my house, I think I shared this with you as well, in the basement. I went to basement, and all of a sudden grenades start falling. There was like periods of time, like usually like mid-morning and like late afternoon, that's when they would do it. And these few grenades, I opened like a basement door. I wanted to like hear what's going on. and my uncle's sheep. He had a few sheep in his yard, because even if you weren't a farmer during the war, you became one, because that was only source of survival. Milk, meat, whatever you had to do. They were feeding off of grass, and then all of a sudden this really strong explosion hit, and all I saw it was this gray dust, and kicked me and threw me against the wall, and I lost conscious. And as I waking up, I see all these small particles just falling in the basement and everywhere. And I looked at the windows, were all gone, and I, as far as I could see, this doors were now open. I looked down the yard, and all sheep, they were all dead. They were killed by this grenade. Of course it's an animal and you feel, but fortunately there was no humans. But I remember trying to get up. As I was getting up, I feel a lot of pain. I was like, what is going on? And I stood up. I went in my hands just to clean myself out. My hands were like bloody. And when I looked behind, my father had tools and axes and stuff in the corner. And when I was kicked back, I landed on top of that. So all of my back and stuff was injured from just falling on top of these things. And again, you become immune. We walked out. I remember my uncle, who also died during the war, aged 38. He just kind of looking and kind of crying over these sheep, crying, and some of them were dead, some of them were half dead, injured and stuff like that. So he had to go in there with a knife and just kind of put them out of their misery. Not when someone says, you take for granted things, when I'm looking at things here as far as food and stuff like that, knowing that there was times when people, including my family, didn't see bread for weeks, bread to eat for weeks. You didn't have any, or salt, or sugar, or oil, or soap, toothbrush, toothpaste. There was no things, to go to doctor. What doctor? There was no doctor. People were dying from simple things as appendix, or giving birth. My mother delivered so many children during the war. She delivered my niece in our home without any expertise, any training or anything like that. Delivered right in our bedroom. I remember just like today. It was May 10, 1992. And that niece, she just lives in Salisbury right now. And that very same child, maybe few days old, when Serbian army tried to take the stronghold of Yugoslavian army that was in our town on top. It's called Mountain Zlover, where the Yugoslavian People's Army had headquarters, and it was a lot of radars. It was really significant importance for so-called Serbia Republic of Srpska army to come to take that. And our men defeated them in the city of Budućin Potok, stopped them with bare hands by cutting trees down, and tanks would get on top of it, and it was slid in the ditches so they couldn't pass. And I remember my father and my brother-in-law running in their civilian clothes with bare hands. That's bravery. And these are the men who were civil engineers, doctors, laborers, all sorts of all sorts of professions. But they had to protect their family. And few days after my niece was born, we had to leave our neighborhoods, go to the mountains to hide. And I remember this particular time climbing up to mountain and looking in the distance one of our neighboring villages, it was just burning. Every single house was burning. I mean, it was just like a daylight, like it was burning. And as we were going down, because we were rushing to get to these caves so we could hide, in that process, my sister, as she was carrying my niece, she, in this fear to save our lives because they were shooting at us in grenades, she had a baby turned upside down. She didn't even realize, and baby was about to just, suffocate. And she was crying. She just thought she was crying because, being young and disturbed. And I remember us hiding in these caves that my uncle found in a mountain. And it was like legit cave that, it was there formed by nature, and hiding inside, and you had this cold water dripping on your head, and you trying to sleep, and it was just some of the scenarios. So many of these things, and it's just as a kid, like I was saying, you become immune to certain things, and they're like, oh, somebody got killed. Oh well, what can you do? It's war. See soldiers coming back injured or killed in battles and stuff like that, or even going to catch fish in where River Drina was meeting River Žepa, and you will see these bodies that they would nailed to the doors, or nailed to some kind of plywood or something that the Serbian soldiers would kill in neighboring city of Visegrad. And they knew when they would kill these poor Muslim men and women, that if they send them down the river, they were trying to send a message that way too. I mean, it's a massive graves that our cousins and neighbors would catch these bodies as they was coming down and just kind of bury them in these massive graves there.
Wow. Well, what I want to do is, in our next segment, I want to continue our discussion with your remembrances, and I also want you to share some of the things that you've shared with me prior about your dad's experiences as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So we'll save those for our next segment. But I thank you for your honesty and willingness to come here and chat and get your story out. It's very important for people to know this.
You know what, Clark? I appreciate you and people like yourself who, you could be sitting in comfort of your home and watch History Channel right now, but you actually decide to do something. And as you know, you also involve some other things, which I'm grateful for that you're doing, and try to help as much as I can. But if I can share this, and if somebody can hear, and if somebody can say, hey, let's stop this XYZ country because it's going down this path. Let's help these people. Let's educate them. Let's understand that war makes no sense. I think we all can, and we could live in harmony.
Well, thank you very much for sharing. Thank you.